Hello everyone, welcome to another episode from City Skylines, this time from the Altengrad city. In the last couple of episodes we were working on this part of the city, mostly expanding the layer right next to the old town. It all started with the port and continued with the railroad connection into the city walls and so on. I wanted to take a little break from that and build something I wanted to do for a long time. Some sort of recently built residential project further away from the city center. So today we will move to the other side of the river where I decided to build just that. So let's go. So today's episode is mostly going to revolve around these buildings. Now this is a pack of 1920s residential buildings from Norway, but they look very similar to buildings that you could have seen in these parts of Europe as well. So I decided to use them in Altengrad. I was constantly just pretty much in every second episode just looking at these buildings in the Find It windows, and I was just thinking, where am I going to be able to build these? Because I really wanted to put them somewhere in Altengrad, and finally I decided that we are just going to abandon everything that we did so far and just pick a place that's completely empty on the map and just finally use these buildings. All right, so that's exactly what we are going to be doing today. Now, this pack comes with many different buildings. It has obviously that bigger quarter circle building that you can obviously create some corners with. And then you have the connection buildings, the line buildings. You have some buildings that are ending on one side. And obviously these tower blocks as well that you can place on these intersections or, however you feel like it. So it's easy to get carried away using these buildings because it's just so easy to work with them, to just fill bigger blocks of some residential areas with these. But obviously you need to be a bit more careful. Now these buildings are white, they are all white. You can't recolor them for some reason. The repainter or painted mod doesn't work on these buildings, so I cannot really change colors. It's not like I really wanted to in this time period, but maybe later as we progress in time, some of these buildings might get a little bit dirtier or something like that. And maybe in modern times they might be completely repainted with some additional insulation put on them or something like that. But unfortunately that's not possible. And I looked at maps, I looked at the real positioning of these buildings, how they are placed in real life, and there's actually only a couple of them. So doing these larger blocks would not be exactly realistic. So I kind of tried to keep it smaller than I wanted originally, because originally I just wanted to create like a huge city block using these. But I suppose we are going to wait with some larger blocks until the 70s or 80s with obviously the concrete buildings. But right now we are just going to be doing something like this. Now, since this is going to be a modern quarter of these buildings, I also decided that we are going to provide some modern looking public transport paths. So for example, these trams are going to go right straight through this place, and there's also going to be some modern looking like a loop for the trams, which I'm obviously going to decorate later to make it look much better. So I'm kind of assuming that this place was not completely empty in Altengrad. Maybe it had some smaller buildings, like really old looking wooden structures maybe. But I don't know, maybe this place was just bought by some developer company or something, however it was back in the day. And they just decided to create this quarter because it's kind of close to the city, still. It's not really like super far away from the city, so that this place might have been some farmlands even like 5 years ago when these buildings might have been, planned. So there probably was something and it was just demolished. Now, I am going to be building quite a couple of more building blocks around this place that are not exactly going to be built using modern buildings, but later we are probably going to demolish those as well and just put some different modern buildings all around this place. So don't worry, it's probably going to look like there are some weird contrasts between this place, of course, these buildings, and some really old looking buildings right on the next side of the street. But I'm probably going to talk a bit more about that, but obviously I don't want to spoil any future plans. So that's kind of the point of this series anyway, so that we are going to build something and then maybe rebuild it as time goes forward. Anyway, you could have seen me just do those tram tracks for the loop. I had to create custom tracks again for that loop because it was not exactly working with those tracks that I had prepared for all these intersections even a long time ago for some intersections in the city downtown, but I just had to create something completely new, and it works very, very nicely, and the loop just looks great, so that's fine. I also was trying to think about how I'm going to expand this place because, I was just building this residential area in this episode, but I obviously had to think about how I'm going to connect it to the rest of the city. I think I decided that around this tram loop right now, we are not really going to see that many buildings or like super densely built blocks. So I just kind of planned to keep it mostly empty. And I only placed that Bauhaus building there, which is, I think in game, it acts as a school. In this day and age, I think it might also be some sort of a architectural school or art school in general. So that just felt nice to place it in there, and obviously follows the style of these residential buildings as well. So that's kind of cool. And that's going to be a place that's mostly going to be open, at least in this year, in this decade. But again, as we progress in time, things might change. This is exactly the kind of block that I was talking about, with some even slightly industrial buildings that might see some changes as we progress into the next decades. I mean, if I say this, then I already have plans to change it, so that's probably not going to be much of a surprise when we're going to finally advance to the 30s, that I'm probably just going to raise that block to the ground and build something different. Like I said, I already have plans for that. I'm just keeping it as a bit of a surprise. Also, this was the first building that I used the new version of procedural objects on, and the new procedural objects version also has the rotation feature, which is especially useful. I think I talked about this on the live stream. It's especially useful for manipulate slightly change angles of those already angled buildings. So for example, that building in the corner has 135 degrees, so it's supposed to be placed in 135 degree intersections or on corners. But this one was not exactly that, and I didn't really feel like just having every single intersection, 45, 90, or 135. So with procedural objects, this version, I can actually rotate one half of that building and make it some custom angle. It's not really suited for like drastic changes, but some subtle changes to really fit it into that place. That's exactly how that can work. And you can't even tell that that building was manipulated somehow, which is really great. And I also used the second instance to just make it higher, because that's one thing that I actually struggled with for today's episode. I have a lot of buildings, right? I have buildings made by Fine Build and Titan and all kinds of creators from the workshop. But it seems like most of these European row houses or row buildings are like late 19th century, or maybe even early 19th century, half of 19th century, just in general 19th century. But I was not exactly able to get some maybe early 20th century buildings or architecture. Yes, there are a couple of them. For example, this one that has that second building into the courtyard, the T-shaped building that you can see right there. I think that actually like literally has 1900 written on the facade at the front. So, that's fine, but it's not exactly looking like a building that might be in the front of some square, or something like that. I really wanted to have some grand looking buildings that might have been built in like 1900s, 1910s, something like that. And there's quite a shortage of those. I only got a couple of them from Poland, I think. And those are exactly the ones that I placed, those three big ones that I placed in that square, because that place really needed some kind of a big, nice looking building that might have been built recently, because this entire place probably received some renovations or just reworks in the couple of years past, right? So I really wanted to use some modern architecture. I know that in some series on YouTube, or even in some parts of Altengrad as well, I'm not exactly keeping attention much to the ages of these buildings, because it's kind of impossible. Sometimes you just need to fill some blocks, and you don't really want to use all the buildings again because you used them 10 times before in the city already. But it's kind of, necessary to, every once in a while, especially on these squares, create buildings that would probably fit the time period. All right, so that's just a quick note about some of these buildings that I'm using. This is very important part of this entire process. Obviously, detailing and decorating and just making this tram loop look realistic or functional, and that's obviously these wires. Now, I especially made these custom tracks for the loop so that they don't have the vanilla or just the standard wires, because they would be obviously built on the tracks, so all around the tracks. But in some of these loops in real life, you mostly see some kind of like a center pylon or center pillar right in the center of the loop, of course, from which all these cables are just like radiating, and they are obviously holding all the cables, and then there's just all the other pillars on the outside of those tracks holding the opposite ends of it. So I really wanted to detail that in, because it's going to make that entire loop just much better. And of course, we had to also do this tram intersection in this square, also detailed with all the wires. And I'm trying to make it so that these wires, whenever they can, they are going to just go into these buildings, so that they are going to be held by some, I don't know, anchors on the sides of the buildings. Because again, it's going to save space on the street, and it's just how it's done in real life as well. But later, we are obviously going to have to change that somehow, because, like I said, that block is probably going to see some changes. Obviously, I had to do a lot of surfaces in here. I decided that this entire place is going to be built using those 1900s Paris roads from the workshop. So they also came with that network surface that I can just use to fill the intersections and cover the crosswalks and all that. But I didn't really want to use just that. So in this main intersection, I'm just going to do the standard approach of using procedural object decals in here to put them just underneath the tracks, but obviously not that low to not cover the actual surface, the asphalt, and the green median, whatever that's called, in underneath the tracks, right? Because that doesn't exactly look cool. I know that I should probably already create some more customized tracks. I do have one street that has cobblestone as standard. That's the one made by Klus. But unfortunately, that's not exactly like a high-capacity road. And this road that's going, that's where the trams are going, that's probably some sort of a main road, which is not really going to see much traffic in the 1920s or something. But later, it's going to see a lot of traffic, because it's the road that goes straight to that steel bridge that goes over the river into the city, which is one of just a few entrances to the city from this side of the river. So this place is going to get a lot busier with traffic in time, and obviously this entire intersection will have to see some major reworks, which probably means that I will have to create more customized networks and just stuff like that in the future. I'm not exactly sure when that's going to happen. Maybe in the 50s, 60s, something like that. Maybe we are actually going to see some reworks on the bridge itself, on the steel bridge. Maybe some widening, maybe putting more lanes for cars or something like that. I kind of already prepared to do that, because I made the bridge very wide, but only made the sidewalks really wide. So there's definitely more space for some future just widening of the asphalt layer of that road. So that's almost done. The rough shape of this area is almost done. It's always a bit of a problem judging just what I need to build to fill an entire episode, but this kind of felt like a finished part of this area, just doing these modern buildings and making some buildings just mixed with these modern ones to really emphasize the fact that this place was not built, like I mentioned in the beginning, this place was not built on just some empty area, but it was probably just put into an existing blocks by just deleting some of the older buildings, or demolishing some of the older buildings, not deleting, right? And like I mentioned before, also this detailing of this entire tram loop is very important, because that's going to look very good in the cinematics. This place is pretty much going to be the main focus of the cinematics. I really enjoyed building this one. It's one of those technical projects that I really like doing in in the city. So exactly this shot is probably what I'm going to use as a thumbnail and some screenshots, because it's just looking really great. I was really trying to make this place look so that if you're going to use like a lower angle of just looking at this place, you are also going to see all the, well, can I call it a skyline, you know, with the cathedral on the top of the castle hill and the castle itself and palaces and all that. So that's going to look really good. That's going to look really good. This place is actually quite taller positioned. I'm not sure if I said that right. So it's quite high above the water. There's definitely going to be some projects in the future just going more towards the river, where I will have to treat this different elevation. I definitely want to create maybe some more older buildings as well, maybe some remnants of the city wall in this on this side of the river. I'm not sure about that. We will have to see, but it's definitely going to be a nice contrast with all these modern buildings, then slightly older, and then all the way to the river. There's probably going to be some like maybe in Renaissance and Baroque buildings as well. Just a couple of them, because this part of the city is definitely newer, and historically Altengrad was definitely a lot larger on the side of the river where we have been, you know, in the past 20 episodes or what. So with the castle hill and all that. But on this side of the river, there's just going to be a couple of blocks, couple of districts with the really old buildings. But apart from that, we are mostly going to just treat this place with modern buildings, okay? So mostly doing just this detailing now around the modern buildings, and even filling some of these blocks with some more finer details, especially in those like little courtyards and gardens on the sides of those older buildings, because like I said, I really wanted to make those old buildings look like they were here before, and you know, just make them look a bit worse, I suppose, even with the detailing. I'm not exactly sure how this place is going to change in the future. We might actually see, I mean, I suppose I can already spoil that. Some of the trees that I'm putting down here, I'm making sure that they are not very tall. I know that you guys recommended me that maybe I should explore the opportunity of just creating some small trees and then maybe making them larger in the future. So I can't do that everywhere or with every tree that I placed in the city, because I just don't have, you know, different versions of that. But I was actually surprised that with some trees in the game, you do have the option of just putting the younger version of the tree and then the older, like mature version, like a full-grown version of those trees. So that's exactly those trees that I placed on the sides of that tram road through the center of this place. And even some of these tiny trees that I'm putting all around this place are also the smaller versions of what can be done. So, you know, if I'm not going to forget about it, I will most probably in some coming decades just replace these trees with something larger. Probably not in the 30s, because, you know, trees don't exactly grow that fast. So we will have to wait until some later decades, and we will have to just replace them, which is probably going to look very good. Just seeing those trees grow. I cannot do it like you know, smoothly. I just have to replace the trees from the young version to the old version, and I cannot unfortunately just I don't know, stretch them somehow and make them larger with every episode, although that would be kind of amazing. Anyway guys, we are done with the time lapse almost, but like always, wait for the cinematics. Like I said in the channel update video, from now on we will do 1 day a week as regular uploading day. You guys voted for Thursday, so this Thursday I will release a new episode from Aurelia this time, where we will continue with the island. I hope you guys liked today's Altengrad episode. If you did, then you can put a thumbs up underneath the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. And if you want to directly support this channel, you can do so by becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. Thank you for watching, take care, and goodbye.